If you want some of the refreshments and bring them in, and you can during the presentation, feel free to go out and get more if you want it. You can you can enjoy it. Enjoy the refreshments while we're talking and discussing, and you know. That's right. That's right. So welcome to this discussion that we're going to have tonight. Um, we it's going to be on society's evolving views of marginalized groups, which sounds pretty crazy, and it is. It's a little bit complicated, and we'll dive into it and see what we learn. And I want to encourage all of you to to keep an open mind, and also I want I want your ideas and your views. We have this whiteboard up here to write down ideas that you have for things that we want to consider and keep in mind. So make sure you raise your hand. Let's have this as kind of a discussion. I'll kind of lead us through things that I've discovered over the last several months about this topic, and I'm not an expert, so we'll kind of figure it out together, and we probably won't have all the answers when we're done, but at least maybe we'll know a little bit more. So I think with everyone, well, if you don't know where the bathrooms are, gender-oriented bathrooms, men and women's back here. There's all gender bathrooms through the kitchen and also through the nursery back this way. The team that we have here from the RIC group is Chris Frisbee and Lynn Peterson, Fred Carbaugh, Kristen Stoll, Cheryl Moore, Pastor Tim Smith, and myself. I'm John Brandt. So I think I know almost everybody here. I don't know if I've met everybody officially, but almost. So let's use this tonight to kind of get our ideas. If you have any other thoughts, kind of even outside this topic or whatever for our team, feel free to talk to anybody on the team, and we'll take that in, and we have meetings regularly, and we'll go over that. So I think the best thing to do is to start out with a prayer. Pastor Tim, I didn't talk to you beforehand. Are you up to doing that? Amen. Make sure this is working. All right. So as a reminder, we have this graceful engagement thing, which is living together in relationship and compassion, fully valuing other people and their beliefs even when they differ from our own, listening more than speaking, meeting people where they are and not where you want them to be. So, and there's a list of the things that it isn't. But I think we're all good with that. So please be easy on me. And feel free to bring things up. And it's possible that we might have to sideline some of the discussions if they go too far or take too long. But at least we can write them down, and we can discuss them maybe at a later date if we need to. So let's review a little bit about where we've been. So last in September, we had a couple of guest speakers, Renee Cooker and Sharon Stockfleet. They talked to us about some of their experiences and how welcoming a church could be, and how they have been to them and how they haven't been to them. And so we kind of started there. We're going to talk now about what's society's views on marginalized groups. And because it's kind of core to the big topic about what we are wanting to be, a more welcoming and inclusive and affirming. So, let's see here. So on those lines, let's talk a little bit about what Chris Frisbee had in her adult forum, and it talked about welcoming, inclusive, and affirming churches, and we'll focus on the inclusive and the affirming. So inclusive is maintaining a space where everyone feels they are belong, regardless of their background or identity. Affirming is accepting and respecting the identities of all people and actively affirming the worth and dignity of all individuals, especially those from historically marginalized groups. So the actions that go along with that are, for an inclusive church, these actions are some of them. There's a lot more, but you take and serve communion, be a member, teach Sunday school, ministry leaders assume leadership roles, have same-sex weddings is allowed in the sanctuary, and open to calling an LGBTQ plus individual and or a person of color as a pastor. So those are some of the actions. Now affirming is a little bit more than that, where you're basically really supporting that group by challenging discriminatory practices, advocate for social justice, and support human rights. So that is kind of the core of why we're learning about marginalized groups. So when I think about marginalized groups, it kind of, and you see what they're going through, it really makes me upset. I don't know about you. And I get these kind of questions. How does this happen? Why does it happen? What can we do about this? How can we prevent this? And how can we fix this? I don't know if there's great answers for any of those, but let's talk about it. There's some, William, if you, I'm looking for input from all of us. And as we go along, if you've got some additional ideas, make sure you bring them up. So, it's complicated, right? Let's try to understand it, because when we understand the source or the cause of an issue, it's easier to address it. I don't know about you, but in my life, you hear about marginalized groups, you kind of think about it a little bit, but I've never really dove down to really figure out what is the source of this. How does this happen? You know the outcome. We've seen the outcome, but what does it do? So this board's here for all of us to put our ideas down as we go through this. And this is the second, or these are some of the sessions we have coming up. This last one right here, potential actions at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. So what are our actions going to be? How do we become more welcoming, inclusive, and affirming, right? And so we can write those down, and we'll record them, and we can bring those up when we get to here as potential ideas. So references. I've read through and looked at a lot of things. These references are available to you. Oops, sorry. So this last one here shows the potential actions at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Sorry, I didn't get that one. And so here's the references. So there's a webpage called The Biblical Case in Support of Same-Sex Relationships. And you have these in your handouts. Oh, and by the way, for the handouts pretty much follow my slides all the way through. They also have some of the extra comments that I talk about that I'm talking about tonight, but most of them are written down in there too. So you can kind of, after the session, or after we get done, you can kind of go through it and remind yourself. And we're recording this. Mark is recording this for us, and so we'll be able to listen to it and as you want to. So that first one, that's where I started, the biblical case in support of same-sex relationships. The another really good one is the Christian case for transgender affirmation. It's a paper that's available online that you can download. Then the Reconciling in Christ organization has many good pamphlets and booklets and things. The one that is really key to what I'm talking about tonight and when we do the called the Reconciling Scripture for Lutherans. It also has another couple called Guide to Welcoming LGBTQ plus IA Youth and Their Families, and Lutheran Guide to Advocate for LGBTQIA People in Church and Society. So those are all at the Reconciling Works organization website, and you can order them. They cost a little. I also use, of course, Google and Google AI. So when I get to the slides where I just did a search, and you'll see that. So for today, the subtopics, kind of things we're going to go through is groups. You know, what's a general group? How does it become marginalized? What's the cause of the marginalization? What's the difference between attributes and labels of a group? Viewpoints and how they can become distorted? And what's the big picture considerations about our Christian viewpoint? So it's quite a bit to go through, and I'm not, there's a lot in my slides and in the paper that I gave you. We may not be able to talk about all of it in detail, but we'll at least go over it and see how it goes. So let's start with groups. So groups, we all like to be part of a group, at least most of us. There are some people that would just rather do everything on their own, live by themselves and live off the land, whatever. But most of us like to be part of a group. Why is that, right? They talk about tribalism, talk about us versus them, and things like that. So in general, we like to be part of a group. And it may be based on our interests, maybe based on some attribute, like what your age is, or your language, or things like that. And it may be based on your location. It may be based on a whole bunch of different things. Those are just some examples. Political. Yeah, I didn't even want to put that in here because you know how that can go. We can just dive down a big hole and never come out. But most of the time, humans feel safe and secure and more confident or more comfortable in a group. They feel less safe and less comfortable if they don't belong to a group. Some of the most uncomfortable times in my life have been when you're new to a place, you're not associated with anybody, you want to be part of a group, right? So, to be part of a group, so let's say you become part of a group. If you become part of a group, there has to be someone that's not part of your group, right? And whenever you get in that situation, which happens automatically, there becomes an us and a them. And we feel more comfortable and safe and secure being part of the us, right? So, sometimes the us can create a new them of a person or a group that the us feels as a threat or danger. I see that happen in politics and other places all the time. So when the us goes to war with them, it makes the people of the us want to align even more heavily with the us. You start fighting and you get like, I got to stay with this group to be safe and secure, right? Sometimes, even within the us, they split. There's a group that splits, or you have us become a new us and a new them, Or maybe even within the us, there's subgroups, right? There's us and thems. And so when you get to be part of a group, you feel safe, and then there's always people that are outside. So when do we want to associate with them? There's a lot of reasons. The big one I think of is when the then has something to do. Did I change that one? Oh, I did. Okay. No. Just a second. If the them have something that we want, we might want to associate with them and try to be friends and stuff like that. So, there is another side to this. What makes us want to help people outside of our group? Any thoughts? It's a question for you. So what makes you want to help somebody that's not part of your group? A good heart. Yeah. You see a need that you can fulfill. Yeah. To reflect Jesus. So reflecting Jesus. I got to remember to, if I forget, I got to remember to say what you guys are saying because we want to get it on the recording. So that, compassion. Yeah.
Another one I think of is just to survive.
Just to survive. So remembering how you were helped when you were outside of a group. Yeah, that really feels good, doesn't it? Well, here's a couple that I came up with, which pretty much follows what you guys, it's very similar to what you were talking about. This is from Google AI, by the way. It says, there are some feel-good chemicals in our brain that may make us want. If you help somebody, you feel good. All right? Sense of purpose to help others. Empathy. Building the community. You want your group to be part of a bigger group, a bigger community. Maybe there's an evolutionary advantage to being part or to associate with other groups or to help other groups. Exchange of ideas, yeah, exactly. You can learn from the other group. More. That's the ego-driven motives down there at the bottom. Love, yeah. Sometimes we have moral and religious direction and examples. Jesus has given us many examples, helping others, right? Common purpose. Family. Yeah. Yeah. So, we've kind of talked about groups in general, and the us and the them and stuff. How do they become marginalized? So this is also from Google AI. I looked at it to make sure it made sense, because Google AI can come up with some weird things sometimes, but this pretty much comes. It started with, well, it's caused by a complex interplay of factors, including systematic discrimination, power inequalities, social biases that exclude certain groups from mainstream society. And that can result in unequal access to resources. And these disadvantages can be perpetuated by policies, historical context, and societal norms that systematically disadvantage groups based on race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, things like that. So the thing I was really interested in is, what's the cause? We want to understand the cause. The cause There's 2 pages of this, by the way. Systematic discrimination, right? That can cause marginalization. Power inequality. So when a dominant group holds power, they may decide this other group, they can take advantage of this other group or something. Social bias and prejudice. So for some reason, we decide these people aren't as good as us, or something like that. We have biases against them. Economic factors. For some reason, another group just may not have the resources that the group you're in has, and so they just kind of become marginalized. Dehumanization. You may try to dehumanize this other group, or lack of inclusion. We go back to lack of inclusion as part of our being more inclusive and affirming and things like that. So anyway, so I looked at these. So we have, I guess I got to remember to keep these in sync. But we looked at these. I looked at these and I'm going, okay, we have, systematic discrimination, power inequality, social bias, just all 6 of those. And they're kind of high-level reasons. What's the root cause? Why do we discriminate?
I think you could add a couple more in there. Education.
Education differences?
And religion.
Yeah. Yep, religion. Yeah, definitely.
How about our assumption, John, that our way, quote unquote, is the best way? If we're among the privileged, how about just the assumption that that's the way everybody should be?
For some reason. Okay, it's back. These are kind of high level, but what causes discrimination? What causes us to think we're better than others? What causes power inequality, what's the root cause of these? Economic factors, dehumanization, lack of inclusion. Okay. Just a second. So what is the root cause? So we had fear, I heard. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about what the root cause is? Lack of the maturity of the heart. So lack of knowledge and experience with other groups.
So lack of knowledge, perhaps, said that other group, because I'm thinking if you actually spend time, for example, with someone of a different culture, different language, you no longer fear them, become afraid of them, think differently about them because you learn about them and know who they truly are in their roots.
Right. Yep. So getting into their world helps you understand them. And yeah. So yes.
Attitudes of peers or parents or influential adults in people's lives often can cause an awful lot of marginalization.
Yeah. So it's learning from people. Yeah, what you hear. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Chris.
going to go another step way, way, way back and consider survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
The way that we are, as beings are, that's part of our DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that probably plays a role in
Yeah.
subconsciously. Whoops.
Yeah.
I was thinking along the same lines. Is this sort of like primordial, like desire to dominate? That if I can find some way that you are lesser than or inferior to me, I can dominate you in some sort of like alpha male sort of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. Fred's behind you. He has.
Language,
Language.
nationality,
Yeah.
in our nationality and language. In our Bible study last week, one of Paul's journeys, they had to go to the island of Crete. And we were saying that
Hold it right here.
we were talking about Paul going to the island of Crete. And then Paul in our Bible study, hey, you're on the east coast and northeast. Cretes were not looked at as very good people, and we called them dumb as a rock.
Ah.
So, you know, those things carry over too,
Yeah.
nationalities and language.
Right. So, yeah.
Being in education for 35 years, also coaching boys basketball for 30 years, one of the biggest things we had to pull against was the wrestlers.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I think this all the time because how the wrestlers are trying to pull some of the basketball players to be wrestlers and vice versa. It goes right along with this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable how.
Yeah. So,
I don't know what the answer was. I just told them if they want to come out for basketball, that's perfectly fine. But once they start, they're not going to go to wrestling.
I was thinking more of, we came from South Tama, which has a Meskwaki population, and they have a settlement, so they own their land. But you could definitely tell before they had their casinos built how poor, I mean, they were lower socioeconomic.
right.
And then after they built the casino and the bingo thing and had money, it really changed for them because it was,
Yeah.
they felt like they had a little more
Yeah.
clout or, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and South Tama was 50% minority, so
Wow.
we dealt with Hispanics and the Native Americans and, so it's kind of, that's what it reminds me of. They were lower socioeconomic, and then they kind of are pulling themselves out of that. But it was a learning curve for us because we knew nothing about their culture, and we learned that they don't want you to know really a lot of things, but they don't want, the kids won't look you in the eye
Mhm.
because they think that's disrespectful. That's part of their culture. Who knew? I mean. That was something we had to learn about them. And it's a matriarchal tribe, so their gugus, their grandmas, were very important.
Huh.
So you know.
Good basketball player.
So it was, I mean, it was quite a learning curve for us. And I can see the discrimination just from living at South Tama.
Yeah.
Money.
Money.
It's a money issue. It's a money issue also. Now,
Yeah.
who has the money and who doesn't have the money? That's already up there, probably resources.
So what I did, these are the ones that I came up with. And actually, that's not quite true, and I'll tell you why. So insecurity. So if you're insecure, you're going to want to maybe take advantage of another group, right? Low self-esteem, aggressive tendencies, lack of empathy, poor coping mechanisms, low self-worth, and learned behaviors. So those fit with some of the ones that you guys were talking about, right? It's not all of them, but it's some of them. And this is actually the root cause of bullying. If you go get a definition for bullying, that's what you get. And if we go back and look at, these key causes, they're all, discrimination. What's the root cause there? Is it you're insecure about yourself, or you are not? Anyway, you take advantage of other people. It's kind of they're all kind of bullying things, right? But it doesn't fit completely. The power inequality. Let me see. The power inequality or the economic factors. Maybe it does. So I was thinking, well, what about greed, right? That's another thing. Let me get this stuff synced up here. So what about greed? So I looked at the definition of greed, and then I said, okay, some of those tie back actually to the bullying definition too. And so in parentheses I put how that ties back, right? So survival instincts, which somebody brought up, or Chris, you brought up, it's kind of an insecurity thing, right? You want to survive, you're insecure. So brain chemistry is pleasure, sense of lack of emptiness. So external things are substituted for happiness. So you have greed, which is pleasure and security. Fear of scarcity is insecurity. Emotional trauma about poverty and instability is also another insecurity thing. Social comparison, low self-worth. So if you're not sure how you compare to society, your self-worth maybe could be improved. And societal structures about prioritizing individuals and wealth. So low self-worth and lack of empathy. So all these things, if you take the bullying thing and you add pleasure to it, they're just these core things that are part of humans, right? We don't want to feel insecure. We don't want to, we may not feel great about our self-esteem. All that stuff seems to me, and the things that we talked about here, are kind of the core. That's where all this marginalization comes from. And if we could address those, maybe we could have an impact, right? So, knowing that, what would stop marginalization from even starting? Any thoughts? People having a sense of belonging. Yeah. Here in the United States, say everybody Everybody. Right. So if there was a common language, everyone would feel they belonged to that group, right? Yeah.
Curiosity.
Curiosity. If we were more curious about other people, maybe that would solve some of the marginalization. Have a global perspective. Which that's a good point, because with my lifetime, the World Wide Web has happened, right? And we're seeing other things in the world, and that really has put a spotlight on marginalization in some respects. You know? So, some of the ideas I had. Create an environment. This is like big picture, who knows whether it's really even possible, but if you had an idealistic world, create an environment where people could examine their own feelings and abilities in the areas of insecurity, self-esteem, all those ones we were talking about, and support people's efforts to improve. So recognize that that's a key thing about humanity that we could maybe improve on. Show love for others. That was a comment from before. Respect and celebrate the unique attributes of each person and the groups they associate with. Find ways to work and associate with each person and the groups they associate with. Be vulnerable, because going outside your group is scary sometimes. Not always, but it can be. You have to kind of take some walls down and put yourself out there and be a little vulnerable. Share with others. So that's kind of the opposite of the greed, right? Share. Don't take pleasure in having more. Take pleasure in sharing. And look for examples from Jesus and other leaders of peace and love. Think of the common good. Yeah. Outside of your group. It's not just your group. Right. Right. All right. Yeah.
All of those things are really hard to do when you're starving, right?
They're hard to do when you're starving. Yes.
How do you show love for others when you're so hungry that you can't think? So this is, maybe thinking of utopia, but eliminating scarcity
Eliminating scarcity.
supports all of these things,
Right.
and it's the opposite of greed.
Right. It's the opposite of greed, eliminating scarcity. So we're thinking kind of crazy here about what's the ultimate world here, right? We know this is not easy, but it's a good idea to do this sometimes, because it can really, sometimes you can find something that addresses these big picture things. Yeah.
And one example that was given earlier about in South Tama, and like I am a teacher in a public school and diverse as it comes, and if I had a child that didn't look me in the eyes when I was speaking to them, based on my culture and my upbringing, I felt that was disrespectful. And so I'd be like, these naughty kids, it's all the kids from the Meskwaki tribe. They're so disrespectful. It could be an easy take. But it's not that at all. If we consider their perspective and their culture, and that it isn't our way or the highway, they're actually being very respectful. That is the way they were taught to be respectful. And
Yeah.
so if we don't only look at it through our lens, but consider where they may be coming from and assume positive intent, I think a big difference can be made.
It all starts with listening. Listening to the other perspective. Yeah. Well, now we've got this all figured out, right? Not. But let's learn about, because this is kind of like, well, now we figured out what we could do to stop it, but it's here, and it happens, right? So let's look a little bit about what happens to get there. And one common step, this is maybe a minor thing, but it's actually a lot bigger than people think, than I think people realize, is creating a label for a group. All right? So what is a label? So example. So Native Americans, right? What's the label for a Native American? Indian, right? We created Indian as a label for the Native American. So what is a label? A label tells us what an item is, like a can of tomato soup, right? Labels can categorize a person. So a Hawkeye is a person from Iowa or a fan of the University of Iowa. A Cyclone is a fan of Iowa State University. Labels enable us to generalize learned attributes onto a person, right? That's right. Yeah. I know. I know. I like to point that out once in a while, that Hawkeye is actually a resident of Iowa. Oh, you need a mic. Mic.
But after we were there for like 10 years or so, we figured out that there were clans in the tribe, and they didn't want you to know who was in what clans. It was a big mystery of what was going on. So some clans want to be treated different than other clans. Now, one thing they didn't like to do was fly kites. What did South Tama Elementary have? Kite Day.
Huh?
Until we found out from one of them spoke up and said, we don't fly. They just didn't show up that day. They would stay home.
Ah,
Yeah.
wow. So then we get into the part, we talked about, they generalize attributes onto a person. Then you get into the part that highlights the movement toward this. I'm highlighting the movements toward marginalization. A label allows us to dehumanize the individual because it refers to the group. A label of people contributes to our tendencies to use the us and them framework. So I'm a Hawkeye and you're a Cyclone or something like that, right? It's easier to assign negative attributes and perform destructive actions toward a labeled group because we don't think about each individual. So,
Why do you, that reminds me, why do you go to Iowa State, University of Iowa State, agriculture, those type of people, and we are city people.
yeah, ag people at Iowa State and city people at the University of Iowa. Yeah. I know. I graduated from the University of Iowa, but I went to the Iowa State homecoming, and I wore a Iowa State sweatshirt. I was being very vulnerable, that's right. That's right. I like that. I was considering other perspectives. A little odd, but all right. So here's some phrasing to think about, and this you think about this when you're talking to people of marginalized groups. So do you say you are a label, or you are a person who has this attribute, right? So here's an example that hits home for me. I have type 1 diabetes. I go to the clinics and they say, oh, I see you're a diabetic. What disease what illness out there do you know of that has a label for it other than diabetes? Cancer. You have cancer. That's an attribute. You're not a canceric. I am a diabetic. An epileptic. Okay.
We go through a lot of these with students with different disabilities. He doesn't have autism. He is a child with autism. He is
Yes.
he's not autistic. Well, he has autism, but he's more than that. He's,
Yes.
so it's the person first.
Yes. It's a person who has this. They're much bigger than just that. And so whenever I hear that, I've been sensitized to it by other people. But whenever I hear, oh, I see you're a diabetic, it's like, no, I also like to ride my bike. I like to, you know, but so whenever a label gets created for marginalized groups, think about it, right? Why did that happen? So another thing to think about this phrasing, boy, I'm behind on the ones up here. Sorry. Another thing about the phrasing is a label, if it's a label, it's a noun. An attribute of a person, like I have diabetes, it's an attribute. It's an adjective. And so you can look up names of all these marginalized groups, and are they a noun or an adjective, a noun or an adjective? What are they, right? And so we'll get to that. But first, another part of this, when is a label okay? Is it ever okay? This might work too if anyway, you have this. All right. So, is there a case where a label is okay? All right. So, I am a Hawkeye. I'm a Cyclone. I love the Hawkeyes. We do that, right? We have competitive stuff and we have fun. We have fun competing and things like that. So that's okay. Maybe that's okay. But that's the other side of that is I am a fan of the Hawkeye team. That makes it a attribute. The Hawkeye is an attribute there. I love the Cyclone basketball players or something like that. So is a label okay here? The only thought I had is whenever you do that, you're kind of creating sides. You're using the us and the them narrative, right? So maybe when you're doing it for fun, it's okay, or maybe here it's assigning it to yourself. If you say, say you're a Cyclone, that's a little aggressive. But if you say, I'm a Hawkeye, you're kind of having fun with it. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking. You know, if you're self-labeling, you know, if you're saying, I am a Hawkeye, I'm saying it. I'm not saying it about you. So I'm not labeling you, I'm
Yeah.
labeling myself.
Right.
So the question is that okay? Is it okay to say, I'm from the Meskwaki tribe? You know, or I am autistic? You know, I'm self-labeling. But I was in special ed for my entire career, and many, many years ago, we intentionally changed our language to say, that's not a special ed kid, that's a student with disabilities. Or, you know, so I don't know if self-labeling is okay, but if I'm labeling you, it's not. That's food
Yeah.
for thought.
Yeah.
This conversation brings up a piece of a book that I read from Isabel Wilkerson called Caste. It was an award-winning book about experience of black life in America and in the world. But one of the conversations she quoted was this little dialogue that she had on the plane with someone she didn't know, who she thought was operating out of some pretty serious microaggressions. And this person turned to her, and the woman said, I'm a good person. She had self-labeled herself as a good person, and that meant she was not a racist, and she would not entertain any aspect of that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's the other side of things. We have to be careful what we call ourselves
Right.
and where that limits us.
Sue?
I was just wondering, as you talked, if it's okay to, if labels are sometimes okay if you're a person who's desperately seeking belonging and needing a tribe.
Oh.
In which case, because when I worked with college students and they would come to this giant campus and they had no one, and then when they found their group, they loved saying, I'm a Sig Pi, or I'm a Hawkeye, or I'm an LCM student, or I'm a whatever. And I think there are okay times when you come out of like a wandering and you find your people.
Yeah.
Because for them there was tremendous joy in that and belonging.
So, it's okay as part of belonging. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just as a piece of it.
Yeah. So.
I think this is a similar thing to what you were talking about, but I think it could be a source of pride for some people. Pardon? Closer? Yeah. Okay. I think it can be a source of pride for some people in certain situations to say, I'm a recovering something, whatever.
Right.
But, I think labeling oneself that way maybe is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it certainly is when you're part of a group that is recovering.
Yeah. So what about this? I am a Lutheran, or I am a Christian. That's a label, right?
Lutheran was a derogatory label in the first place.
So that's maybe how it got created. Probably. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Elsa.
Sometimes in a mixed group, or when I meet a new person, or especially somebody from another area or another country or something, I ask them what they would like to be labeled.
Oh.
For example, I found that one student who was from Japan was very upset when we would call him Japanese. He said, no, I'm not Japanese, I'm a man from Japan. And everybody else in the class was quite surprised too, so we started talking about some of that kind of thing. And then others from other countries, it was a very mixed group of students at that time, on that semester. But I really learned a lot about that, and say, well, what is your label of yourself? What would you like us to call you? Not just your name, but what are you? And I've thought about that about myself too, because I'm such a mishmash. Who am I? What am I really? What would I like to be called in a way besides my name?
Right.
So that has helped me to ask certain kinds of questions.
And you think about it, he didn't use as a label. He is a man from Japan. He's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like I'm an American. That always confused me because America is North and South America and all that kind of stuff. Does that mean United States of America? I don't know, but same type of thing.
Lutheran and Christian are equally confusing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm pausing and thinking about is with respect to individuals from the LGBTQ community.
Good segue.
When our speakers last time, Sharon, it was very obviously she referred to herself as being queer.
Yeah.
And I can't help but thinking that for individuals who are part of that community, where I think Sharon even said something to Renee the other night that, for Sharon, I mean, it's not obvious when you look at her what group she belongs to, but it was very obvious that Renee is a person of color, is a black woman. So I can't help but wonder for individuals who are part of the LGBTQ community, or at least the LGBTQ community, whether or not by having a label if they kind of endorse that label on occasion because it gives them more power and more visibility, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sarah, you might be able to, with your experience in working with
Well, why don't we
folks, you might be able.
why don't we save this, because the next section is about labels for the gender-oriented groups. So let's segue into that. So we have BIPOC, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color. That's what the BIPOC stands for. So this next section here has got several different things that we're going through the different names and stuff like that, so you can see what they are. And I'm not going to be able to read all the definitions. It's going to take forever. But also, I marked whether they're adjectives or nouns. Back again, the adjective nouns. Are these labels or are these attributes of the people, of the group, right? And so you notice on this, they're all adjectives. So a black person, an indigenous person, a person of color, they're all, and whoever came up with BIPOC probably had that in mind. They didn't want to create a label, they wanted to create a description of these people, or attributes of these people. So, next we have, we're moving into the sex or gender identity groups. So, heterosexual, homosexual, cisgender, lavender. Lavender marriage isn't really a label, but I wanted to have it in this group for a reason. So the cis is, for me, is the most recent. You know, someone whose internal sense of gender corresponds with the sex of the person, with the sex the person was identified as giving birth. So this comes in the transgender world, that this adjective, that's an adjective, a cisgender person, right? Whereas homosexual and heterosexual, you can use that as an attribute or as a label. That person is a homosexual, that is a homosexual person, or you are a homosexual, right? That both works in our language. So lavender marriage, a marriage of convenience entered into by at least one homosexual person to protect their safety, reputation, or career, and to gain legal and social benefits available to single queer individuals. So lavender marriage, a homosexual, maybe two homosexual people get married to their opposite sex, but they're not sexually attracted. So they're protecting themselves. Isn't it weird that this happened? Or, I understand how it happened, but it's like, why do they have to do this? Right? Why can't they marry a person that they are attracted to?
I overheard that some of you haven't heard of this, so I will tell you, I know people that haven't admitted this, but I have reason to believe it. The example is, one is a Lutheran pastor woman, and the male has a family that's from the conservative Lutheran, so you don't dare be gay.
Right.
Excuse my words if that's wrong wording. But from watching these two grow up and knowing what they got into, I don't mean extracurricular, but from plays that they were promoting strongly or pictures on their wall, I have reason to believe. So, I don't know if it's true or not, but we did research it, and it is a thing beyond my experience.
Yeah.
So you can study about it a little.
All right. So any questions about these before I go on to the LGBTQ plus definition, because that's the one that Okay, this is very small type. You might have to look in your brochure to even see what it is. But I wanted to get it all on one page. So LGBTQIA plus, and here I added the IA is actually the longest kind of acronym that they have that they've created with the plus in the end, because it adds a couple other types of groups. So L, lesbian, G, gay. And one note about gay, gay is a general term for basically homosexual, whether it's male or female. Sometimes it's attributed to just male, but sometimes it's attributed to males and female. B is for bisexual. T is transgender. Q is queer and questioning. I is intersex. A is asexual. And plus is all other gender and sexual minority identities, such as pansexual, non-binary, and two-spirit. So, I'm not going to, you guys can look at the definitions later, but it's interesting that several of these are both adjectives and nouns, which means that they can be a label or they can be a attribute of the person. My guess, kind of like Pastor Tim, you were saying that Lutheran was derogatory at one point. My guess is that they started out as an attribute. Somebody created, oh, I'm a transgender, or I'm a bisexual person, and some aggressive person decided to make that into a label. Somehow it got changed to a label over time. So my goal is to try to use them as adjectives in sentences, as attributes and not labels. Let's see, so let's go to the... Yes, Lutheran was just Lutheran, yes, yeah. So, oops, here we go. Then the plus, let's go through these a little bit more carefully because these are not as obvious. Pansexual, attraction to people of any gender or to people regardless of their gender. Abrosexual, a person whose sexual orientation is fluid and changes over time. Gender binary, a system that classifies sex and gender into two distinct categories, male and female. Non-binary, genders don't fall into one of these two categories, male or female. So non-binary is everything but male and female. Two-spirit, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Aromatic. Aromatic is where you don't have any little or no romantic attraction to others. Agender, a person who has an internal sense of being neither male nor female, nor a combination of male or female. So they just don't have any gender feelings at all, right? So the two-spirit is interesting. I'll read it. Used by some indigenous North Americans to describe gender identities and expressions that exist beyond the Western binary of man and woman, encompassing roles that were sacred and respected in pre-colonial times as healers, spiritual leaders, and cultural artisans, often viewed as having both male and female spirits within them. The term was coined to reclaim indigenous traditions and resist colonial cultural appropriations that has erased these historical gender roles. So, here in our European descent, we think of male and female, that's kind of been the tradition. Other cultures, not necessarily. So it's interesting that maybe we're catching up, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
Like the ladies were really in charge of the tents and neighborhood. The men were hunters. So
Yeah.
the women really ran the homes.
So as Fred said, the women ran the homes and the men were in charge of the hunting and other things. So, yeah. So, and here's the last slide I have on attributes of, this is marginalized groups, other marginalized groups. There's other marginalized groups. There's so many marginalized groups, but here's ones that I put down: Native American, Hispanic, immigrant, disabled, Jewish or Jew, Christian, homeless, poor. So
Jen?
Asians, yep. There's so many, but marginalized Christians were marginalized at one point, right? When they first, it's in the Bible where they got abused and things like that.
John, just a couple of those terms there that are also being replaced, right?
Yeah.
In lieu of disabled, I'm assuming that differently abled is now more preferred to that. Is that correct from teaching capacities, or
neurodivergent?
Being more appropriate yet?
Okay.
And then homeless, unhoused.
Unhoused.
The word I would use in light of that.
Okay. Yep. So the one thing I thought was another interesting kind of, the Native American, Hispanic, and immigrant, those are all have a noun, have a label. They're a label, and those are all people that kind of in our society right now have been marginalized, right? So part of marginalization seems like creating a label for them, which is unfortunate. So, kind of to end this part about labels, which one of these seems the most gentle? Are you gay? Are you a gay? Or are you a gay person? It's a quiz. It's a quiz. So, not appropriate to ask this question in the first place, but anyway, so the point I was just trying to make is this middle one is a label. The other two are attributes of the person. A gay person, or are you gay? That's assuming person is after that. So anyway, I'll have to redo that slide, sorry. So now we're going to go into viewpoints, and I'm going to rush along a little bit because we're going a little bit. We're having some good discussion, but so there's viewpoints of a person. The things that kind of are relevant to what we're talking about is, what are their behaviors, what's their identity, and what's the relationship they have with others. That's kind of, we're talking about marginalized groups and in the gender-oriented world, that's kind of the things that come into play oftentimes. And so if we look into the behaviors, it's like, what type of honest interactions, slow to react, quick to react, there's all these different behavior type oriented things. If you talk about identity, we have heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, man, woman, intersex, tough, weak, supportive, listener. There's all these different identities a person may have about themselves, or you may have about other people. Is this person wise? Is this person young? Is he old? Okay, so then you have relationships with others. What type of relationships does this person have? Is it loving, user, abuser, long-term, short-term, coexist, ignoring? So if you take, there's a couple examples I have, pages of examples. If you take a negative view of a behavior and add a label to it, that's often what gets used when you're talking about anyway, when you combine those, it gets into kind of a negative world. So The USA will designate reservations for Indians, right? So what was the behavior that was assumed that would cause the United States to do that? Any thoughts? Power. Fear. Fear of the Native Americans, right? Greed, yep. Blacks are violent and require more police security to enforce laws. It's also fear, right? So, right, and you look at kind of the history of that and going, ha, anyway. With our military technology, we can feel safe against Russia, right? Again, fear. Fear is going on there. So what if you change those to a feeling of love and support for those same groups, right? The USA will respect the heritage and land use of the people who are native to the Americas and will share the resources and ownership of this great land. If we took that approach of love and support, well, if we had taken that, if we'd taken that approach, that might be where we ended up, right? Or with, I know, things would be different. I know. Yes. People of African descent were brought to this country against their will. Each one of them is important to our country and deserves investments in their cities, neighborhoods, schools, housing, and businesses so that we will all prosper. Prosper together, right? Imagining this is kind of hard, isn't it? That's not where we are. The people of Russia and the United States can work together to share technologies, resources, and intelligence and focus on changes to make the world a safe place for mankind of today and future generations. I always wonder, why are we so against Russia? Partly because of is it because they are not democratic? You know, they were, yeah. But it's kind of like, feel like we created an enemy. Does it need to be that way? I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We've done spaceship launches with them. So here's a viewpoint. So keeping that, I just want to get us in the mindset that we can create these weird views of people that don't necessarily make sense in the end. So where the viewpoint that the behaviors of the LGBTQ plus communities is not right, do not make sense, it's yuck, right? That's a viewpoint of the LGBTQ plus community. It's not right. Where'd that come from? I felt that when I was young. I was maybe learned it or something. It has changed over time. I'm not there now. You felt that way when your dad gave. Right. So Lynn was bringing up that in 1946, the translation of the Revised New Testament or Revised Standard Bible used the word homosexual in it. The translation did. And there's a movie about it, which that might be one of the movies we're going to show. Anyway, that is a interesting topic. So, is this because maybe genetics, hormones, that we just don't, most of us don't feel it's right because of the way our genetics and our hormones are, our relationship with man versus woman? So is that the reason? Or is it because of the us and them mentality? They're different than us, so they're a them. Is it something we've learned? Is it our leaders that are making us feel this way?
I feel like in a lot of these situations, it's not a one thing. It's an and.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important to point out. And, like, why is it not right? According to some people, why do they feel it is not right? Sometimes it's because it's not the majority.
Yeah.
And we expect everyone to be the same, or it's different than us. Like, I don't feel that way. How could you feel that way? Well, it's not you. You know, it's a different feeling. Maybe you can't relate to it, but it doesn't make it wrong. And so just like that, considering others. And in so many of these cases, I work with really, really young kids, and I can promise you these are learned behaviors.
Okay.
You don't see this behavior out of young children.
Yeah.
They are there to love, and they are there to be people. And
Yep.
so I do feel like a lot of it is society and like the fear mongering and all of that.
Right. So I'm going to go into a couple examples of how we're going to talk about the leader's influence and the religious and biblical influence. And for example, what was the source of the Spanish flu in World War I? We thought it was Spain, right? It was actually Haskell County, Kansas. That's where it came from. Skipping down, another thing is sex for gay men is due to over-the-top lust and is a vice, right? That's maybe what we think. But in reality, most LGBTQ plus relationships are based on love. There has been little exposure and news of loving relationships between same-sex couples. I know in my life, I have a lot of friends or acquaintances that are homosexual. There's only, all of them are looking for a loving relationship. I know one case where a guy was looking for a loving relationship and then another guy, and this other guy was a little bit more intent on the having sex with other guys type of scene, and so he let him go. And he was, so that's what is really there. But I don't know, I've seen so much in the news and about.
That, hadn't thought about this, but that happens in heterosexual couples where some people are more permissive,
Yeah,
and some of them are more looking for a long-term relationship. There's a variety. I hadn't thought about
yeah,
that.
yeah. So that's part of the views, right? We have views of relationships, we have views of behavior, and we have views of identity. So here's some patterns that some of our leaders have. When something goes wrong, some leaders want to blame something as a distraction or an excuse for their own shortcomings. Marginalized groups are often the target. If resources are short, leaders will decide to reduce the resources of some groups, which can turn them into a marginalized group because they don't have resources anymore. Some leaders want their followers to have something to rally around, so they may create a new enemy, create a new marginalized group that they can all rally around and have a fight around. So, and if there's an outside group has something that your group wants or needs, you can have a couple options. You can go to war against them to try to get it and rally your homecoming troop or your internal troop to try to get that, or you can take a risk and try to trade for what you want. So here are something to think about with the viewpoint of the LGBT community with our religion and Bible viewpoint. So this is something that we all need to keep in mind. Do religious leaders and their followers use the Bible to support their own internal viewpoint about the LGBTQ plus identifying people and other minority groups? So are they have their viewpoints and using the Bible to support their own viewpoints? Or do religious leaders and their followers use the Bible to determine if the LGBTQ plus and minority groups have God's support and use that to create a biblical-based viewpoint? So which way is it going? Are we using the Bible as a source, or using our own viewpoints as a source and try to having the Bible support it? So here's some examples of where I think things have gone may be wrong. And this first one, same-sex relationships are a sin. We're going to go into more detail on this in a few months when we talk about the Bible scriptures and stuff, but this is just kind of a top level of it. So, non-affirming view is the same-sex relationships that are a sin. The affirming view is that the Christian tradition doesn't address sexual orientation. It doesn't even talk about it. Biblical and ancient texts talk about the same-sex behaviors as a vice of excess and over-the-top lust. It is not talking about sexual orientation. It's talking about abusive or relationships where you're not really dedicated to your partner, right?
Including rape, John,
Yeah.
in many cases.
Yep. There are non-biblical writings from the biblical times that indicate the existence of male-to-male exploited relationships through pedestry, prostitution, and master-slave. A first-century orator, Dio Chrysostom, lamented that pedestry was rife in Paul's hometown of Tarsus. And Paul writes about same-sex relationships of men with men, right? So in some of the writings that we'll look at, you might see, it's probably because of his experience.
In the Bible, it seems it's always man to man.
Yeah, it's in the Bible.
Hardly other woman to woman.
Right.
And if I could, since I live and listen to him think all the time about this subject, clarify that some of this we're going to get into is teaching the backstory of the Bible or the culture at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's reflecting what their own understanding of the world was, which was not our understanding of the world the same way.
Right.
So orientation was just not something they understood at all. They didn't just not talk about it, they didn't understand it the same way.
Yeah.
They assumed a given orientation, just like we assume our own things in
Yeah.
our dating.
So as the last sentence there, it kind of talks about that. Biblical and ancient texts do not write about loving and caring same-sex committed relationships. They just don't. It's not there. They talk about problems of relationships, but they don't talk about a loving, caring relationship. Another one, let me see. Oh, I'm going to skip this. Real quick, I was saying, well, why wasn't there sexual orientation in the biblical times? I says, well, they didn't have insurance, so they needed to have babies. The Jewish people wanted more people in their group, so they wanted to make sure that they procreated. And there wasn't any good safe birth control. So there's some reasons why it wasn't part of that culture. I'm sure there's more reasons than that. But so celibacy is another interesting part in same-sex relationships. So the non-affirming view requires that gay Christians be celibate. It is okay for a person to have the identity of being gay, but a gay person should not participate in the sexual behaviors of a gay person, right? Why? Because we are all born into sin, and we should make efforts to end our sinful life as God has taught us, which is true. So a gay person should not have a sexual relationship with a same-sex person because it is sinful. All right, so that's a viewpoint. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, celibacy. Right, so celibacy is not having a sexual relationship with anybody at all. Yes. And so the affirming message is that we already saw kind of the same sex, the sinfulness part is questionable, right? So let's put aside that and look at celibacy by itself. Celibacy is a vocation, or it's a phase in life. Scripture teaches that celibacy is a gift. It is given to some people and should be celebrated. It is not a calling for some. If celibacy is not a person's calling, then marriage is the answer. That's in 1 Corinthians 7:7-9. Requiring the LGBTQ plus people to be celibate is depriving them of a loving relationship and turns celibacy from a gift into a punishment. So, right, he was not for celibacy. So, here's some, we're going to finish up here with some big picture thinking about us as Christians. We should keep our mind open to our current place in history. Our times are different than biblical times and much different than even 100 years ago. Sound Christian teaching should show good fruit, not bad fruit. And non-affirming beliefs about LGBTQ plus and their relationships can harm them and should cause us to reconsider our interpretation of of Scripture. So something to consider, Gentiles were accepted into Christianity, when Christianity started as a Jewish thing, Gentiles were added to that later. That was a change in what they originally thought, and that's in the Bible, in Acts 10 and 11. Christians stopped supporting slavery due to their new understanding of the Scripture and the harm it caused. And there's several verses there that talk about the key verses that they focused on when they said slavery isn't right, even though it's in the Bible. In the United States, I think Christians don't accept slavery, right? Even though it is in the Bible. So, if we affirm, we're pretty much out of time here, but so we talked about how to stop a group from being marginalized. I added a couple little things to that our individuals and our leaders should examine themselves first about their basic feelings towards insecurity, because our own internal feelings can push us to marginalize other groups, and we should try to stop that. And we'll maybe talk about this in our adult forum, but how do you become more affirming of a person who belongs to a marginalized group? You focus on I think we have a minute. Focus on the individual and show respect for the groups they are part of. Resist the us versus them mentality. Invite and welcome the person into your group. Communicate that you want to learn about them and from them. I think a lot of times once you open yourselves up, find out that these people that are marginalized, they actually have a lot more insight than we do about the things that we think we know about. Instead of using labels, use attributes. Step into their world, which Elsa, you were talking about. Step into their world and learn about who they are, or maybe that was Cheryl. And in our world of greed and security, be vulnerable and move toward love. So here's a quick summary. We won't go through that now. You guys can read it in your presentation or your booklet there. Sunday we're going to have an adult forum, and we're going to talk about, so we talked about how do you stop it, how do you talk to a person. Well, how can we help move a marginalized group into the mainstream again, where they belong? And that should be an interesting discussion. And I think you've all seen the schedule of our things coming up. The next thing which is incorrect on here, we have microaggressions. We're having problems finding a speaker for that, and so that might be put on hold or delayed to another time. We'll let you know. So don't depend on that microaggression one at this time. Yeah, we want to have it. We're just not sure when right now. Yes?
Cindy and I have talked about the Native Americans at South Tama. Meskwaki tribe. But just so everybody knows, and I don't know how much anybody knows about the tribe, but they came from the Mississippi, Sac and Fox, and they moved west, were forced west. The biggest difference is they own their land. And when you start using reservation, everybody thinks they're on a reservation. They are not on a reservation. They purchased a tract of land along the Iowa River, and they still are buying land in Tama County.
Wow.
So every time you go to the casino, that just gives them a little bit more money to buy up more land. So it's a settlement. It's a settlement. It's not a reservation. Yeah. It is, but I'm sure a lot of you still thought it was a reservation. It's not a reservation. So you don't learn anything, you learn that one.
Something I thought of, John, it was on one of your earlier slides about listening to other people and to learning from people from marginalized groups.
Right.
But I think it's also important to remember that not everybody in those groups feels like it's their job to help us understand ourselves. So be willing to put in the work yourself. Look in the mirror, examine yourself. And yes, be open, but don't go into a conversation with that as an expectation.
Yeah.
John, I just wanted to thank you for all of the work and hours that you put into this presentation tonight.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And thank you in advance for the biblical scripture that you're going to teach us as well, because the Bible does say that, you know, homosexual is a sin, and we need to hear what the Bible really is saying.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I guess we're up to. We are a little bit past 8, so if anybody needs to go, fine, go. If you want to talk about this more, we could. Maybe what we should do is we should end in a prayer, and if people want to stick around and talk some more about it, we can.
Sure. Pastor Sarah, are you game?
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Gracious God, thank you for this holy time and for this space to question and think new things and learn new things about people that you have created. We give you thanks for all humans, and we ask that you open our hearts and minds to understanding one another better to your glory. We ask at the end of this discussion for safe travels home and a peaceful night in the middle of a long week. We give you thanks for all of these things. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right. Any other thoughts?
See you Sunday.
Yeah, see you Sunday. Talk to us one-on-one, whatever you want. Thank you all for coming.